All right, let's dive into one of Australia's greatest unsolved cases. This is a story that feels less like a typical police investigation and way more like a spy thriller from the height of the Cold War. It all kicks off on a quiet beach with a mystery man, a secret code, and a trail that leads right to the shadowy world of international espionage. This is pretty much all the police had to go on. Two words, Tamam Shud, found on a tiny scrap of paper hidden on the body. It's a Persian phrase that means it is finished. But finished how? Was this some kind of cryptic suicide note, or was it more like the final sign-off from a secret agent? These two words gave the case its famous name and set the scene for a real-life mystery.
So to really get what's going on here, you have to picture the time. 1948. World War II is over, but this new, secret conflict, the Cold War, is just starting to heat up. And believe it or not, quiet, out-of-the-way places like Adelaide, Australia, were becoming these unlikely fronts for a global intelligence war.
Okay, so let's start right where the whole mystery began, on a cold, windy beach with the discovery of a body that would have investigators scratching their heads for well over 70 years. So on December 1st, 1948, this man is found on Somerton Park Beach. He's dressed perfectly in a suit and tie, but he has no wallet, no ID, absolutely nothing that says who he is. And here's the really weird part. Every single tag and label from his clothing has been carefully snipped off. This wasn't some random robbery. This was a deliberate, professional erasure of an identity. And then the autopsy just makes everything stranger. The guy was in perfect physical shape, but the coroner was absolutely convinced his death was not natural. He suspected a very rare, sophisticated poison, something that was completely untraceable with the technology they had back then. This points to a death that was meant to look natural, a method that, was a favorite of intelligence agencies. And that leads us to the big question that haunted investigators right from the start. Did this man really go to all this trouble to erase his own identity just to commit suicide? Or was this a clean, professional execution, designed to leave the police with absolutely nothing to go on? With no ID, the police were basically left with a pile of random objects. But these weren't just some guy's belongings. They were clues. And these clues would lead investigators down a rabbit hole of cryptic poetry and secret messages, something straight out of a spy's playbook. You know what's so strange here? It's how the clues started to surface. They didn't find everything at once. It was a slow drip over months. A suitcase found weeks later, that piece of paper found months after that. It almost feels like someone was intentionally orchestrating this whole thing, creating a puzzle piece by piece. Let's circle back to that scrap of paper for a second. It wasn't just in his pocket. It was rolled up tight and tucked away in a tiny hidden fob pocket that had been specially sewn into the waistband of his pants. I mean, who has a secret pocket for a secret message?
So the police make a public appeal, and a local man comes forward. He'd found a book tossed into the back of his car right around the time the body was discovered. And it's this very specific, rare edition of a poetry book called The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. And when they look at the last page, the part where the words Tamam Shud are supposed to be, it's torn out. And this is where the case goes from a mystery to straight-up espionage. Because inside the back cover of the book, police found this, 5 lines of what looks like a secret code. They brought in military codebreakers, top experts, and nothing. To this day, nobody has ever been able to crack it. It's a tantalizing peek into a world of hidden messages.
So we have a body, a poison, a secret code. It's got all the makings of a spy story, but it's missing one thing, a human connection. But that book held one last secret, and it would lead the police to a very mysterious woman who might have been the key to this whole thing.
Scrawled on the back of the book, right next to that unbreakable code, was an unlisted phone number. It belonged to a local nurse, a woman named Jessica Thompson, who just so happened to live only a few blocks from where the body was found. All of a sudden, our anonymous man had a connection.
But when police talked to Jessica Thompson, she pretty much denied everything. Said she didn't know the man, had no idea why her number was in his book. Case closed, right? Well, decades later, her own daughter comes forward with a bombshell. Her mother had been lying the whole time. She not only knew the Somerton Man, but his identity was a secret known to a level higher than the police force. Wow. That strongly suggests some kind of intelligence agency involvement. Thompson did admit one little thing to the police, though. She said that back during the war, she'd given a copy of that same poetry book to an army lieutenant named Alf Boxall. And guess what Alf Boxall did for a living? He worked in military intelligence. The connections just keep pointing back to the world of spies.
So everything seems to be pointing towards espionage. But the big question is, why Adelaide? I mean, what on earth was happening in this sleepy corner of Australia that would make it the setting for a real-life spy drama?
Well, as it turns out, this region was anything but sleepy. It was a hotbed of secret Cold War activity. You had the Woomera test range, a top-secret weapons and rocket facility, and you had the Radium Hill Line, which was one of the only sources of uranium for the West's new nuclear programs. Both of these sites would have been massive targets for Soviet spies.
So when you step back and look at all the pieces through that Cold War lens, they start to fit together, don't they? You've got a strategic location, a sophisticated, untraceable poison, a meticulously erased identity, and a secret code. These aren't the signs of a random death. They are the calling cards of a professional intelligence operation. And for decades, that's pretty much where the story ended, a perfect, unsolvable mystery. But modern science, well, it had one last secret to pull from the grave.
For 73 years, he was buried in a grave that just said the unknown man. That's it. For decades, detectives, researchers, and armchair sleuths all tried and failed to give him back his name. Then, in 2022, a major breakthrough. Using advanced DNA analysis on some hairs that were found trapped in the original plaster death mask, researchers finally did it. They put a name to the face. The Somerton Man was Carl Charles Webb. So, who was he? Carl Webb was an electrical engineer from Melbourne who was going through some messy personal stuff. And this new identity solved a few of the small puzzles, like the name Keane on some clothes in his suitcase. That was his brother-in-law. But it also opened up a whole new can of worms. Why would a regular electrical engineer be at the center of what looks like a spy plot? See, knowing who he was doesn't explain why he died. Why did this electrical engineer end up dead on a beach, with his identity completely scrubbed and a secret code in his possession? And what was his real connection to Jessica Thompson, the woman who apparently lied to protect his identity for her entire life? In the end, finding out the Somerton Man's name just makes the whole mystery even deeper. Was Carl Webb just a troubled man whose private life led to a bizarre and tragic end? Or was this quiet electrical engineer actually a player in a much larger game, a pawn in that silent, secret war being fought in the shadows? That is the final, unanswered question in one of the most baffling cases in history.